The 38-minute war. The Anglo-Zanzibar conflict. Picture this. You wake up, brush your teeth, make coffee, and in that same amount of time, an entire war could begin and end. Most conflicts drag on for years, some for decades. But what if I told you there was a war so ridiculously short, it ended before most people even realized it had started? Welcome to the most absurd 38 minutes in military history. Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm. August 1896. The exotic island of Zanzibar, floating like a jewel off the East African coast. This wasn't just any tropical paradise. This was the epicenter of wealth. Spices that could buy kingdoms, ivory that decorated European palaces, and unfortunately a thriving slave trade that made sultans incredibly rich. And where there's wealth, there are empires circling like sharks. The British Empire had its claws deep into Zanzibar, but they needed one thing: a puppet ruler who'd play by their rules. Chapter 2. A throne, up for grabs. Then, like a bolt from the blue, Sultan Hamad bin Thawini, Britain's golden boy, drops dead. Suddenly, the throne is empty and chaos erupts. Before the British can even send a telegram, Sultan Khalid bin Bargash storms the palace and declares himself the new ruler. But here's the problem. Khalid wasn't on Britain's Christmas card list. In fact, they suspected he'd tell the British Empire exactly where they could shove their influence. This was unacceptable. Chapter 3. David versus Goliath. Sort of. What happened next was like watching someone bring a knife to a gunfight. Khalid, drunk on power and defiance, gathered 3,000 men, barricaded himself in the palace, and even wheeled out some rusty cannons. He was ready for a siege. Meanwhile, the British? They casually sailed 3 warships into the harbor, the HMS St. George, HMS Philomel, and HMS Thrush, floating fortresses bristling with modern naval guns. On the ground, 150 British Marines with machine guns. It was like bringing a sledgehammer to swat a fly. Chapter 4. The Ultimate Deadline. At 8:00 a.m. sharp on August 27th, the British delivered an ultimatum that was polite, precise, and absolutely terrifying. Your Highness has 1 hour to evacuate the palace, or we will remove you by force. Khalid's response? Pure, stubborn defiance. I will not leave my ancestral home unless you drag me out. The clock was ticking. 59 minutes, 58, 57. The entire harbor held its breath. This wasn't just a standoff anymore. This was a countdown to the most lopsided conflict in human history. Chapter 5. When Reality Hits. 9:02 a.m. Time's up. The HMS St. George unleashed hell. The sound was deafening, shells screaming through the air, crashing into the wooden palace like thunder from the gods. Within minutes, the mighty fortress was a blazing ruin. Khalid's cannons? Obliterated before they could fire a single shot. By 9:30, most of his army had either fled in panic or lay scattered across the courtyard. And by 9:40, just 38 minutes after the first shot, Sultan Khalid himself was sprinting out the back door like his life depended on it, because it did. The war was over. Chapter 6. The most one-sided victory ever. So, what was the final score of this epic conflict? British casualties, 1 sailor with a minor injury. Zanzibari casualties, around 500 dead and wounded. Duration, 38 minutes. Cost, the price of a few dozen artillery shells. By lunchtime, Britain had installed their preferred sultan, cleaned up the debris, and probably sat down for tea. The shortest war in recorded history was also the most efficient hostile takeover ever executed. In the time it takes you to watch this video, an entire war could have started and finished twice. The Anglo-Zanzibar War proves that history isn't always about epic century-long struggles or heroic last stands. Sometimes, it's about 38 minutes of absolute chaos that changed everything. Sometimes, the most important moments in history are also the most absurd. And somewhere in Zanzibar, there's probably still a clock tower that could have timed the entire conflict. Next episode, the Great Emu War of 1932, when Australia declared war on birds and lost.